finally got the Zoom connection to work. And I think I am live on, I think I'm live on YouTube. Let me double check, Lord. Let's see. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I'm just checking to see if I'm actually live on YouTube. I keep trying with this thing. What's going on, Mimo Thrax? Bridget? I don't know. It says I'm live. Okay, well, doesn't look like I'm live. Huh. Welcome, everybody. Just trying to get this connection on Zoom. This time I thought I got it right, but I'm not sure. Let's take a look. One second. Welcome. Have a seat. We're going to be talking about initiations. Initiations. Welcome, everybody. We are live for another weekly live. Every Wednesday, I'm here at 8 o'clock, like clockwork. I was actually lighting up a bit of incense. You know what I'm saying? Clear the energy, clear the space. I would say, create the space to receive, for real. All right. Got a bit of tea, just waiting for folks to jump right in. Either way, I'm gonna get started, you know? Okay, beautiful. I had to have my partner do a test. And we are live on YouTube. Last time I didn't get it right, but this time I did. All righty. Okie dokie. All right, thank you for being here. If you're catching this on the replay, welcome. Appreciate you being here as always, whether you are live or you're just catching it on the replay. And I really appreciate y'all, for those who comment, participate, leave comments, and do all those wonderful things, and just continue to engage and keep the conversation going. And just, you know, asking questions as well. I really appreciate that. So if you have any questions that come up later in this this chat, and if you're not able to ask it live, you can definitely send me a DM through IG. And of course, I always say, you know, continue the conversation offline, join my Thrive newsletter. And also, I have 125 self-reflection questions that will change your life. Feel free to cop that. It's free. And I've heard it's actually pretty good. So, you know, maybe you might want to check it out. I have some turmeric and ashwagandha. Can never say that word. Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha. What's going on, Kim? All right. So one question I wanted to ask is, who here believes life is one big initiation? If you believe that that life is one big initiation, you can just leave a comment, let me know, give me a thumbs up, heart, all that stuff. What's going on, Lily? I was just asking if people believe life was one big initiation. Ooh, sipping on that peppermint and lemongrass. I love lemongrass tea. So good. And I think that peppermint offers a nice little balance. But define initiation. Oh, we're about to get into that. So initiation is, to me, it's a concept as old as humanity in itself, if you think about it, right? Because, we'll get into the because, but initiation holds a lot of power to really transform our lives if we embrace it as such. It's a process. Initiation is really a process of being taken from one state to another, right? Much like the metamorphosis of a butterfly, right? Let me fix this. Oop, there we go. You know, from a caterpillar to a butterfly. And yeah, Lily, life is one big adventure. if that's what we want to call it. So what we're going to do is just dive deep into the world of initiation, exploring what it means, how it manifests in our lives, and why it's such a beautiful and powerful force for personal growth and transformation. What's going on? Chocolate kisses, archetypal alchemy. Oh, I'm going to bring up some archetype conversations tonight. So it's interesting that you popped in. Sermons? I don't know about sermons, child. I just things be coming up and I just be like talking about it. You know what I mean? What's going on, Kenya? But it's fascinating to see life as one big initiation. I'll be bouncing back and forth from YouTube to Instagram. But when we start looking at our lives through this lens as one big initiation, something interesting happens. And we tend to resist the ups and downs of life a lot less, if at all, because we know that it's all part of the human design, the design of life itself. And so when we embrace life in that way, life gets a little smoother, I mean, we may not, like it, but we tend to ride the waves with a bit more finesse when we see life in this perspective. But we begin to understand that whatever challenges that we might be facing are being initiated into, we are being initiated into something greater, right? And deeper within ourselves. That's really going to expand us in some shape or form. Granted, there is actually a shadow part of initiation. So we're going to get into that a little bit later and what that looks like. But for me, this concept really clicked during when I was exploring plant medicines. I didn't really connect to initiations until I started doing plant medicine ceremonies. And because it really felt like I was stepping into a sacred ritual, a really deep, profound ceremony. It even felt like a rite of passage, right? It felt like all that was happening all at once. And these experiences actually felt like they were initiating me into realms that went way beyond what we typically see. And I know that sounds a bit esoteric, especially if you've never tried plant medicines, but it really allowed me to go below the surface than I've ever done in my entire life. And to me, that was one powerful initiation, well, several many, but powerful initiations. What's going on? Just saying hello to the crowd. Kim said, when ish hits the fan, it is what it is. Listen, okay? It is what it is. You can't fight it at that point, right? It's very true. But, through my plant medicine ceremonies, I was able to really shed a lot of layers of myself, previous identities each time that I did. And I got closer to my own personal power, ultimately feeling less disconnected within myself. And to me, that's really what initiations are. It's about getting closer to who you really are, getting closer to your own personal power. And, let me know in the chat, whether you're watching this live or you're catching the replay, what initiations that you've gone through, or what kind of initiations have you been resisting to undergo, right? Because that's what makes life a bit harder, when we resist the transformations that are supposed to expand us in some shape or form. But what's interesting about this idea, right, as life being one big initiation, is that, again, this is not entirely new. This is not a new concept. It's something that many indigenous cultures have understood for ages. And a lot of them still practice a lot of those kinds of initiations. What's going on, Candy Red? Been a minute. And so we find that like young people are like prepared to be initiated in some of these indigenous cultures. And even though they might be scared, they know that this is a tradition. So there's this sort of acceptance through this process, and they accept whatever is supposed to happen next. And so a lot of these become rites of passage, right? They mark big transitions in a person's life. And so, for instance, like going from a kid to an adult, getting married, or even in a lot of indigenous communities, when you're stepping up to be a community leader. And what's unique is that sometimes these indigenous cultures will have, specific ceremonies for rites of passage like that, right? And it's not just focusing on the individual, it's really focusing on the community itself. And it's about their role within the group. It's about what kind of impact that they're going to have in the community as they go through this sort of initiation. And it really illustrates how connected they are. And often a lot of these rituals, we'll say, are rooted in spirituality. And so there's a link to, their ancestors, the spirit world, and nature. And you'll often see things like, special dances, songs, body paintings, all packed with meaning that is connected to that person's culture or the stories. And then elders in those indigenous communities obviously play a big part in passing down those kinds of traditions and wisdom during these initiations. And so some of these initiations can be really tough. My plant medicine ceremony was not for the faint of heart. That's probably one of the toughest things I've done in a long time. And some of these initiations often involve physical and mental challenges meant to really test a person's strength, courage, and commitment, not to just themselves, like I mentioned earlier, but also to their communities, right? And so overcoming some of these challenges is really a source of pride and personal growth. And so these initiations are a big deal in a sense. I remember when me and my partner were in Peru and we climbed Machu Picchu, I felt like that was an initiation. Man, that was one of the hardest hikes that I've ever done. And I thought to myself, man, the Incas, like, they did that. I don't know how often they might have climbed to the top of those mountains. And I think about like back then and how being able to do that climb back and forth and what that meant to be in that space at the time when I was doing that hike and to be in that energy. And it felt like such an accomplishment. And it felt like something that was so hard for me to do that I was able to actually do it. It does something to you when you go through initiations like that. It really turns a switch within you. And so when you're in those moments, you're being called forward, right? You're being called forward to change, certain aspects of your being. Kim said, I haven't had the plant medicine initiation just yet, but being initiated into my spiritual walk wasn't easy. Yeah, there's different levels of initiation, and we'll talk about that. So that's just one aspect of it, right? Even you just taking the path towards like getting to know yourself on a spiritual level is initiation in itself, because now you are being challenged to rethink narratives and rethink old identities that may not align anymore with where you're headed and who you are today. So it's some powerful stuff. And in this process of initiations, there might be symbolic gestures. And I mentioned rituals already, I think. Those are a big part of it. And so everything from objects to action all has a special meaning, often linked again to cultural stories when you think about indigenous tribes. And there's also, like I said, a strong connection to nature. Sometimes these initiations mean spending time in the wild, connecting with the animals, the plants, the trees, and taking part in ceremonies linked to just the natural cycles of life, right? Or like planting and harvesting. And, one of the things that I had to get really comfortable with when I was going through my plant medicine ceremony, although this conversation is not about plant medicines, but it just illustrates it beautifully, is that I had to spend some time in nature. Your homegirl was not a nature or outdoors person. I grew to love the outdoors from traveling and doing hikes with my partner. And I've just connected a lot more, but it wasn't something I grew up with. I grew up smashing the bugs. Okay. I grew up running from the bugs. I grew up not wanting to play outside because it was raining, kind of thing. And so being in nature for me was also initiation, allowing nature to be what it is without trying to change it, without running from it. So for me, being in nature was just an initiation within itself. And I remember when we did some of our retreats, a lot of people were nervous about the nature bit. If that's something that you're not comfortable with, how do you sort of stay in the presence of that powerful presence and energetic levels of nature, right? And I think it's so important because nature is we're so closely linked to nature. And so being able to find peace within that connection is indeed crucial. But a lot of these ceremonies can also be quite transformative, right? They're often seen as a way to heal, both physically and spiritually. They also might help us deal with some past traumas, discover what it is that we're here to do, because something, again, might just click, and also get to know ourselves better on a deeper level. Remember, while at the core of idea of initiation is pretty consistent, the specific practices can just vary from like culture to culture and how we do things. But in all cases, these ceremonies are really crucial for shaping somebody and allowing them to connect and step into their own personal power. And we can debate, that some of these initiations might be a bit controversial, but, who am I to judge, how other cultures do what they do. But when we think about like this, our fast-paced world, right, the modern world, there's this realization that many of us have kind of lost touch with this ancient wisdom initiations. And we forget how paramount it is to our evolution as beings here, right? Not everyone, of course, has lost touch with this idea, but a lot of us have. And so we often see like life's major milestones, like, graduating college, getting a job, tying the knot, buying a house. We see those things as initiations, and they certainly can be. However, they truly become initiations when we consistently or consciously acknowledge them as such. And what I mean by that is that we have this clear understanding of who we are before, after, and also during that entire journey. We often underestimate what it takes to go through milestones like that, because, we often are autopilot. And I want to be clear, like, I'm not downplaying the significance of these life events, especially if it's something that's very important to you, right? They're important to you, to whomever it's important to. But sometimes, again, we go through life on autopilot, right? Because it's like the next item on the list, the next box to check, or the next right thing to do, without really connecting to the deeper meaning of that thing. People sometimes, they get married because it's the next best step, right? But is it something that you're really connected to on a deeper level? And if you are, then you are going to be embraced and challenged through this initiation. And if you're not, then you might not even notice that connection at all. And so true initiations, and that could be subjective, as I call true initiations, in my humble opinion, that's a different story. They're like a metaphor for life itself, right? And here's the thing, once we start seeing life as not as a series of obstacles or setbacks, but as a continuous string of initiations, everything in our life changes for the better. It really does. And if this resonates with you, let me know in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts about that, because you might disagree. You might say, nah, I ain't buying it. And that's totally cool. But what happens when we go through these initiations, we begin to see them with fresh eyes. We begin to see our lives with fresh eyes. We begin to see our lives with a renewed sense of energy. After going through my plant medicine ceremonies, it was like, I felt like I was living in a completely different world than the one that I had created. So there was a new sense of energy. There was a different way of approaching my life moving forward. And then what you find is that your mindset begins to foster courage, and it becomes really powerful stuff. And so the core of an initiation is really about, again, the transition that often involves leaving behind an old self, right, to embrace a new one. That really is what initiation is. And like I said earlier, initiation still exists in this modern world, but again, I'm sensing that many of us are resisting our own necessary initiations. And when we do that, it causes a lot of internal conflict, right? We begin to just bump against ourselves, fight against ourselves, because often we don't want things to change, or we often want things to be different than they actually are. Yeah, it's that death and rebirth. And sometimes we might have to do that a few times until we finally like settle into who we are supposed to be. And I've noticed that when you begin your initiation, sometimes we can get confused. We can get a bit disoriented, almost like a mental fog, depending on the initiation. It kind of reminds me when I was going through my own dark night of the soul. This was way back in like 2015. Well, actually really started like 2013, but I felt like I was at emotional standstill. And that's what really led me to go to my first retreat. And then after my father passed away in 2016, that mental fog just sort of deepened. And I saw myself just like in an emotional daze for a while. So I was just really confused about my presence in this world. And so when you're in that initial state, you might be feeling that way. And what's going to happen is the universe is going to send you all kinds of challenges along the way, because this is an initiation. It's a rite of passage. And so you'll have some tests and some challenges that's really going to push your limits. And for me, losing my father was like, oh my God, the ultimate limit for me that year and beyond. Because what the universe is trying to say here is like, are you ready to let go of who you think you are for who you can actually become? And so these challenges are really meant for you to really connect and see who you really are, to see how courageous you can be. It's a bit like facing the great unknown. Like when we go into initiation, we don't know what's on the other side of that initiation. We don't know what that journey is going to look like. We don't even know if we're actually capable, right? If we have even the skill sets to actually go through a process like that. But I always say, you come fully equipped, right? You come fully equipped with all the parts and pieces and all the things that you need to go through this life, because that is part of the design. We might not think that. We might be disconnected from that truth, but I believe that to be the case. And so when you're being faced and confronted with that unknown, it really forces you to take this new approach of looking at those challenges. When my brother passed away last year, I had to look at grief and death and loss more differently than I had ever had before. Because I didn't want to be stuck in the previous version of myself who had dealt with my father's death, because I was just in a mental, like I was just not there. And so that person then was different than the person who had to experience the loss of my brother, of a sibling. And so here I was again, forced to look at this experience, similar but different. I was forced to look at it again differently. And that's what initiations do. They literally force us to look at aspects of our lives differently. And then what comes to part where you have to bring this new understanding and this perspective after you've gone through all that back into your life to integrate, right? To reintegrate, right? It's almost like you fall to pieces and you pick yourself back up and you're like, whew, what just happened here? And now you have to live with this newfound sense of perspective, approach, energy. And what you find is this phase is where you're really reshaping your sense of reality based on what you've experienced during that initiation. And so the real mission here is to really take that wisdom and then apply it, and then your life will transform. What's going on, Sandra? And so while on this journey, when we're going through this initiation process, you're going to encounter some archetypes. And I've witnessed this when we do our retreats, what comes up for people. But archetypes are really just symbols or themes that we all universally connect with. But these archetypes help us explore and understand the complexities of the human experience. And sometimes they pretty much lay deep in the subconscious. So I'll give you an example. Your boss might be the archetype of your mother, right? And there are some things that you have to learn through that relationship to better understand yourself and your mother, right? And so when we're undergoing initiations, some of these archetypes might take center stage. And we often confuse other people in being a certain archetype, and we play that out because we have some unresolved emotional wounds that need to be healed. What's going on, Black Men Run? So when you think of archetypes, you want to think of them as characters in your story. And sometimes these archetypes, like I said earlier, are valuable for our growth and journey. And they can actually come in the form of a mentor or a guide. And so as you're experiencing these initiations, you really want to take note of the kinds of archetypes that might pop up. And there's all types. There's the hero archetype, the mother archetype, the sage. There's a list. And to help with this journey, this is also why rituals exist. We talked a little bit about rituals through the Indigenous lens, but rituals essentially help us crystallize the change process as we go through these initiations. And what I mean by crystallize is just they make the intangible tangible. They give it form. And so a ritual is really a deliberate and intentional process that helps us to sort of make sense of the powerful change that's happening to us. So for instance, sometimes one of the things I have my clients do, if they haven't dealt with a lot of the anger that's going on in their lives or the things that they're angry about, I have them do an anger burn. And to let go of the anger, right? That's laying dormant, simmering within them. That is a ritual, right? You do an anger burn, you take the paper, you write all the stuff that you're angry about, uncensored, unfiltered, and you set it on fire and you watch it burn and you just release all those things. That is a ritual. Doing a ceremony around forgiveness. All those things are rituals. Again, rituals help us to make the intangible tangible. It concretizes our process. And so what was once a fog, the ritual helps to bring more clarity through that process, helps you to become more grounded, sometimes more at peace, and you're able to go through that acceptance phase. And so the connection between rituals and the initiations, again, help us bridge the inner world and the outer world. So maybe take note during your initiation journey, what rituals can you do to help you crystallize your experience, essentially allowing it to take form and doing a symbolic gesture that allows you to sort of process, maybe end something or begin something, right? Death and rebirth. Okay, so I kind of hyped up initiations, like embrace them, they're awesome, they're great. Because yeah, it's a very important part of the human existence, but there is also a shadow part of the shadow self of initiations that I want to briefly talk about. And we can agree that initiations are not easy. Whether you're sitting in a plant medicine ceremony or you're choosing to be in a conscious relationship, you will be pulled into a challenging journey. And often some of these journeys are quite painful, but it's a process that needs to take place in order for you to grow. And when you're facing the shadow side of initiation, and just briefly, shadow side just refers to the parts of ourselves that we often keep hidden or the parts of ourselves that we deny. And these aspects of our personalities or experiences that we might find uncomfortable, embarrassing, or even painful, right? It's like our emotional and psychological blind spots. So that's really what the shadow self is. And so when we encounter the shadow self of initiation, it really refers to the failed initiations and trauma. Imagine someone going through a challenging experience and that wasn't planned or expected, like losing a loved one or facing something that's life-threatening. These are called failed initiations because they just weren't chosen. Doesn't mean they're bad in a sense, but you didn't consciously choose them as an initiation. And because you didn't choose them, they can be actually quite disruptive and incredibly tough to go through, because now you're being forced to confront something, that you were never ready to confront in the first place. And so these sort of difficult experiences can actually, again, push us to confront some of our deepest fears and vulnerabilities at a time when we're not expecting. And so they make us face parts of ourselves that we may not be ready to acknowledge. Imagine a situation, a parent passes away and suddenly you find yourself confronted with unresolved feelings around that person, whether it's anger, sadness, whatever it is, feelings that you never got a chance to address while they were still alive. And so now in their absence, you're compelled to confront and work through these emotions at a time that you were not expecting to do so. And so that could be an incredibly tough process, but it can also be incredibly transformative and actually liberating. So what you initially thought was something that was terrible now is freeing you from whatever unresolved emotions that were just laying dormant for that time. And when we go through experiences like these, inevitably, if we embrace them, we will emerge a changed person. And so it's a different kind of, the shadow part of initiations is a different kind of transformation compared to something that you plan to do. Like I planned to sit with plant medicines, but it's still a transformation nonetheless, right? And so again, we might gain new perspectives on life, become more resilient, and even discover strengths that we didn't know existed. We discover the things like, wow, I didn't even know that I could actually do that. But through this really terrible experience, I connected to a part of myself that I didn't know existed, right? So it's like, how can I look at this in a way that is a bit more, beneficial and optimistic? What's going on, Carisha? It's going to help me move forward and make sense of my life moving forward. So we're almost nearing the end here, but, I say this to say that all initiations are not pleasant or chosen, but they can still lead us to powerful growth and change if we allow them to, right? By making us confront our inner shadows and vulnerabilities head on. And so think of initiations as a journey for you to decide to, think of it as a journey you decide to go on versus something that happens randomly, right? It's like saying, hey, I'm really ready for this change in a meaningful way because I know in the end, it's really going to powerfully change my life in some shape or form. What's going on to here? How's that immersion going? You're taking a quick break. To here in the house, she's having her beautiful immersion. Check out Ecology of Clinical Shamanism. Head over there. I saw some beautiful photos actually of the ladies. Where was I? Yeah. So when we're on this initiation path, we won't know what a lot of it is about, but it's really about powering your attitude, because your attitude does matter when you go on something like this. Being open to change, being optimistic, trusting in the divine, that will allow the journey to go a bit smoother. And it's about saying, hey, I'm open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, new ways of being. And to go on this journey, you genuinely have to have a desire to transform, to change, right? It's not something that's done casually. It's saying, I'm really excited to become a better version of myself. But I'll be honest, I never, stood in front of initiation and said, I'm really excited to be here. I don't think I've ever done that. If you had, let me know, but I've never done that. I'd be like, oh man, here it goes again. It is what it is. Let's roll. Let's see what happens at the other side. And I embrace it with closed teeth, just like this. Okay. But it's really about welcoming the change versus resisting it. Resisting it is not going to get you anywhere. It's a misuse of your energy. While you're sitting there resisting this process, you could be taking that energy and pouring into you embracing that change. Yep. That's right, Carisha. Somehow you just get there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, whew, I made it on the other side of that. Jeez. But you're also saying like change is a part of life. And I'm ready for it. It's inevitable. It means that you're being willing to let go of old patterns and belief systems that no longer serve you. Again, you're embracing new ways of feeling and being, and also saying that I'm really committed to the initiation process, right? I'm resisting, and it's so tough. It is tough. I think the best question to ask, because what I find that the main ingredient when people are resisting is that they want something to be different in this moment that cannot be different. And so can you make peace with the idea that this situation will not be different as much as we desire it to be different? You know, I was talk about my father, and I wanted to have a different relationship, but it just wasn't going to happen. And I had to find it within myself to alter that thought process so that we could have some of what of a relationship, because he was around. It was just, he wasn't the person that I thought he would be. And I don't want to go too deep in the story because I've shared it before, but part of that resistance is wanting something to be different than it actually is. The resistance will lessen when there is a greater acceptance. And when you can accept, then you can begin to live, to gain the wisdom that you need to sort of move forward. Because when we're in resistant mode, we can't get these ideas. We can't get the wisdom that we need. We're literally blocking ourselves off, right? And when we commit to staying on this path, this initiation process, even when it gets tough, it's really about not giving up, even no matter how challenging it is, because it's like, I'm here for a reason. And part of this process is for me to see this through the end. And what you're going to find is that when you hold steadfast on this journey, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to gain a ton of wisdom and experience, sometimes in really condensed amount of time. And this wisdom is going to help you make better choices in life. It's going to help you connect to your intuition in a different way, all because now you're understanding yourself better in a different light. And you're coming less from a place of fear and more from this empowering, energetic space, right? So in a nutshell, initiation is a journey you choose because you genuinely want to grow and change. And it really involves you preparing yourself as much as you can. And what I mean by preparing yourself is just the mindset, right? It's about recognizing the distorted thoughts that are telling you that you're not going to be able to make it through this process, but really recognizing that, like, I am well equipped for this journey. I have everything that I need to make this through. And if there is something that you need, fill in that gap, whether it's a mentor, therapy, guide, whomever, fill in that gap. And remember to maintain a welcoming attitude through the process. And ultimately, it's really about using what you learn to make powerful life decisions moving forward, to add to your personal growth, and to connect to who you really are. As I always think of initiations in that format, it's like, okay, this means that I'm going to learn a different layer about myself that I may not have ever been able to connect with had I not gone through that initiation. And so initiation is really this universal process that we all go through, every last one of us. Some of us might avoid that initiation, and we'll notice the impact of that avoidance. We will over time. And so I think there's a question. Oh, let me look at the YouTube chat. I'm like, oh, there's somebody there. I didn't know. Okay, let me see. I appreciate it. I'm learning. Thank you. She said this is her first live. Child, this is my first live too, because the last one, there was no sound. Learning tons about myself right now. I never really loved listening to my own voice before. Took me out. Oh man, funny. Yeah, you gotta get used to your own voice. You know what I mean? That's where the power lies. Oh, Linnea, you're welcome. Not a problem. But yeah, so whether it's a traditional ritual or an unexpected life event, initiations, is a journey that shapes us into the fuller versions of ourselves. It allows us to emerge stronger and wiser on the other side. So as you go through sort of these life transitions and challenges, remember that everything is right on time. And I know it's cliche, you hear this often. Sometimes people don't like hearing it, but it's just true. I don't know. I connect to it, but nothing is happening to you. Everything is happening for you. Some of y'all don't like that phrase, but I gotta use it. And just know that this is just another initiation. So whatever it is that you're experiencing now, recognize that it's an initiation and welcome it, and see who you are on the other side of that initiation. Let's see if there's any comments. Look here. No comments. Okay. But yeah, if there's any comments, questions, you can hit me in the DMs. Make sure you just join the Thrive newsletter, where we can have conversations like this offline. And you already know, like, social media, who knows? It might collapse one day. So stay in touch. Oh, you're welcome, Linnea. And you can also get the 125 self-reflection questions that will change your life. It's free. Link in my bio. I heard it's pretty decent. So go copy all that. And I'll be here next week, next Wednesday, 8:00. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I say it all the time. We'll see what happens. But if there is something that you want me to talk about or expand more on, let me know, and I'll consider it if it makes sense. Okay. Thank you for watching, participating, commenting, and I hope this helped in some shape or form. Be sure to follow me on YouTube and subscribe and connect with me when you can. All right. Take care, y'all. And I'll see y'all next time. Yeah, it'll be a replay. You beauty. It'll be a replay. I'll put it up. You're welcome, Kenya. Good night, everybody. This introvert's gonna shut her mouth and not talk to anybody. Okay. Bye. Yeah, everything is always on time.